Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the University of Arizona School of Journalism's John Peter and Anna Catherine Zenger Award for Freedom of the Press and the People's Right to Know. My name is Tony Paniagua. I am a news and public affairs reporter and producer at Arizona Public Media, the PBS and NPR stations right here in Tucson. I am your MC for this evening's event. Tonight, we honor PBS Washington Week host and NBC News correspondent Yamiche Alcindor. Arizona Public Media and the law firm of Ballard Spahr are sponsors of this evening's festivities, and we thank them for their support. The School of Journalism has presented the Zenger Award to an array of prestigious and groundbreaking journalists since 1954. Tonight's award winner is no exception. The award is named for colonial-era printers and newspaper publishers John Peter Zenger and Anna Catherine Zenger. John Peter published the New York Weekly Journal until he was imprisoned in 1734 for seditious libel on order of New York's colonial governor, who served for King George II of Great Britain. Upon his imprisonment, his wife Anna Catherine Zenger became publisher of the Weekly Journal, the first woman known to publish a newspaper in what is now United States. She continued, let's hear it. Way to go, Anna. She was the first woman known to publish a newspaper in what is the United States. She continued publishing the Weekly Journal for the entirety of her husband's imprisonment. John Peter Zenger was incarcerated for 8 months before he was acquitted of libel, making him, Anna Catherine Zenger, and their newspaper not only symbols for freedom of the press, but also an inspiration to those who made press freedom an intrinsic part of the newly emerging nation. It is in the spirit of John Peter and Anna Catherine Zenger that we honor Ms. Alcindor this evening. Now it is my pleasure to introduce the director of the School of Journalism, Dr. Jessica Retis. Dr. Retis became the school's director in July as the first Latina and woman of color in the position. She is originally from Peru, an amazingly beautiful country, not in the script, but I'll just say it, where she worked as a journalist for newspapers, magazines, and television before embarking on what is now a 3-decade-long career in academia, including research and professorships in Mexico, Spain, and the United States. She established a graduate program in bilingual journalism here at the university, the only one of its kind in the country. Please welcome Dr. Jessica Retis.
Muchas gracias, Tony. Welcome, bienvenidos todos. Before I give you all an update of our school, I would like to thank you, our standing staff members who have done a fantastic job organizing this event. Please stand up. Jennifer Bates, Chris Edgebourne, Martha Casberry, Alex Berry, Colomba Brooking, and Nathan Wilson, and of course, our student worker, Kathy Freeman. There they are. It takes a lot of work, hard work and long hours to put on an event like this, and we deeply appreciate that all you've done. As some of you know, we are an accredited school, which means that we receive the visit of ACAGMC, a national accrediting organization that evaluates our performance. Our last accreditation was in 2018. We're getting ready for a new visit that will take place in a few semesters. We want to keep our excellence in education, and with that objective, we are working on a 3-year strategic plan. It will help us achieve the celebration of our 75th anniversary with a collective goal of bringing our school to the best of its versions. The school is transforming its pedagogical model to prepare the next generation of professionals with the skills and mindsets needed to lead in the post-digital era, while transitioning from the print-only tradition to the multimedia-inspired preparation of storytellers. We're embracing our unique character through project-based and community-engaged teaching. We started a new curriculum, launched new programs, and hired new faculty and staff members. A recent donation, a gift from the Severson family, allowed us to start the construction of a new broadcast and digital studio and complete the first phase of the project. The new studio will reinforce our distinctiveness and inclusivity pedagogies by allowing us to expand to our summer high school journalism diversity workshop into hopefully a year-long plan, benefiting high school students and instructors as well as drawing new majors into our program. It will provide the much-needed infrastructure to offer training to local community members as well as mid-career journalists through our connections with national professional organizations. Many of them are here. In 2018, the University of Arizona was recognized as an Hispanic Serving Institution, HSI. And since then, our school has doubled the efforts in advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and belonging values to better serve our student body. We launched innovative programs such as BA and MA in Studies of Global Media. Both programs are being offered online and growing our international reach. We also launched, as Tony said, an MA in bilingual journalism, a unique program in the country as well. I'm glad to report that the bilingual program has been approved and we will launch online in fall 2023. In total, we have now 5 programs that are part of our offerings, including, of course, our BA and MA in journalism. We also have a PhD minor in journalism and a strong set of specialties, such as science and environmental, digital and broadcast, and global journalism. Furthermore, we offer several dual degrees with Latin American studies, legal studies, Middle Eastern and North African studies, and public administration. We are in conversations with other units on campus to create new specialties and dual degrees. We're advancing our programs. Our collaboration have moved internationally, having signed an agreement with our microcampus in Peru, Peruvian, going back to Peru, and with Universidad Peruana de Ciencias Aplicadas. But it's not me, it's Dr. Janine Reddy. Thank you for leading the efforts in that area. We envision making the school a go-to program where students will be trained in border, global, and bilingual journalism. We're also seeking to build new certificates programs in podcasting, digital video production, bilingual, border, and environmental and science journalism. This year, we also welcome new faculty members. Please, I want you to stand when I mention you. Monica Chara, Associate Professor, who hails from, Monica, where are you? You are here, I saw you. There she is. Monica Chara, Associate Professor, who hails from Mumbai and has worked at the BBC India Bureau. Her research focuses on entrepreneurial journalism, identity construction, and journalistic routines and practices in digitally news startups. We also welcome Liliana Soto. Of course, she's filming. Assistant Professor of Practice, who has a decade of experience in broadcast news in English and Spanish with a specialization in bilingual investigative journalism. We're about to produce our very first bilingual newscast in next week, right? Next week. We also welcome Paige McMichael, Assistant Professor of Practice, currently the Director of Undergrad Studies. He brings 15 years of journalism education experience at several universities, including Chico State and Georgia College. Sadly, we have to say goodbye to full-time instructors Maggie Zenger and Celeste Gonzalez, and also staff members Mike Chesnick and David Cross, and we want to thank them for all their years of service. This is a bittersweet moment because this year, 2 of our senior faculty will enjoy their well-deserved retirements. Please help me clapping Carol Schwalbe, former school director, the main spirit behind launching and growing our science and environmental journalism program. There she is. And Kim Newton, who has led our photojournalism and visual storytelling areas. Where are you? I saw you, Kim. Where are you? There he is. Thank you, you two, for all these years of service in the school. Our student, thank you. Our student landed interesting jobs. This is the time of bragging, but we don't have much time, so it's going to be fast. Interesting jobs after graduation. Recruiters, please pay attention. I know I see some of you here. Our alumni are making difference out there. Current students have also done impressive internships. And I'm just going to name a few, but there are so many out there. Clara Migoya was named national winner by the Society of Professional Journalists Mark of Excellence Awards for collegiate journalists. She was hired by the Arizona Republic. Sam McNeil joined the Associated Press in Jerusalem as a video journalist. He previously was working with AP in China. Zach Rosenblatt is covering the New York Jets for the Atlantic. La Monica Everett Haynes is the Associate VP and Chief of Communications Officer of Strategic Communications and Public Affairs at San Diego State University. Sofia Moraga Franco accepted the position of digital producer at La Estrella de Tucson. Kendall Blas is a reporter for the KJZC Fronteras Desk, which won the last Foreign Desk Agencies Award for the Arizona Agenda this year for their coverage on northern Mexico and the border. Several J School alums became broadcast reporters for local station called, including Jack Cooper and Carson Courier. Eun Kim is the deputy White House editor at Politico. She previously worked at CQ Roll Call. Matt Ruiz has been hired as a multimedia bilingual journalist at Univision Arizona. Vanessa Lucero became the NAJ NABC News Summer Fellow in New York. Gloria Gomez, our 2022 Bowles Fellow, accepted a Pulliam Fellowship at the Arizona Republic as a reporter covering breaking news. Fantastic job. Our faculty are also doing great service in the school, the university, the profession, and the community. Our professors of practice are making difference. Mike Mackinson is contributing photographer for the nonprofit news startup Luminaria, Arizona Luminaria. Liliana Soto served as a mentor and leader of the broadcast program for the NAJ convention and just recently anchored the elections coverage for ACPM. Ruxanda Guidi won the Religion and Environmental Story Project Fellowship from Boston University. Her podcast, The Catch, produced with Foreign Policy, was finalist for International Women's Podcast Awards. Those are some of the many accomplishments of our professor of practice. Our research professors also are advancing relevant scholarship and academic service. Susan Swamber was awarded tenure and promoted to associate professor. Yay! She keeps advancing her publications on the history of science and environmental journalism, the public understanding of science, and the intersection of law, science, and journalism. She's also served as associate director of the School of Journalism during the transition of the headship and until the beginning of November. Among many projects, she has led the collective goal of writing our bylaws and our student self-study report. Muchas gracias, Susan. There she is. Janine Rayleigh, whose 3 grants of nearly $250,000 recently have enabled 12 professors and 70 students from University of Arizona and 4 universities in Yemen collaborate on projects with student media and branch beyond classroom borders. Our students this semester have shared experiences with students on the front lines of war. Dr. Rayleigh has been appointed the Associate Dean of Faculty, something I talked to with our dean. We're going to miss her, but we know that she will keep her liaison with our School of Journalism and leading our global studies initiatives. Thank you so much, Janine. Dave Collier serves on the Federal FOIA Advisory Committee to provide guidance to Congress on how to improve the Freedom of Information Act. He's currently the president of the National Freedom of Information Coalition. Professors Janine Rayleigh and Monica Tara are documenting their impressive work with Yemen students and professors, and soon will be studying work of journalists creating startups in zones of conflict in Yemen after obtaining 2 generous grants. The School of Journalism has also received the support of the University of Arizona for our initiatives on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We applied and obtained the Provost Investment Fund to help launch and recruit the first cohorts of bilingual journalist students. Are you here? Can you raise your hand? Or bilingual masters, graduate students, bilingual journalism students, there you are. We also applied and were awarded the Center for University Education Scholarship CUES for the project titled Bilingual Journalism Education in the United States, Development, Implementation, and Assessment. We have also been very productive in terms of innovative publications. Janine Rayleigh and Celeste Gonzalez published the book Surviving Mexico and won different awards, like the AHMC Tanker Book Award, the Council in Latin America Prize, and the Frankfurt Louis Monde KTA Journalism and Mass Communication Research Award. I'm also glad to report the publication of 2 of my new books, Reporting on Latinx Communities, A Guide for Journalists, the first book of its kind, a textbook intended to be used in every classroom and hopefully in every newsroom. So if you are a news director, please get this book because it's written by Latinx journalists and professors from all over the country. We also publish communicative spaces in bilingual context, discourses, synergies, and content flows in Spanish and English. We're trying to make a difference, starting with if we want to impact newsrooms, we have to start with schools. In recognition of the school supporters, we honor 14 at the School of Hall of Fame in April. This event was a tremendous success, honoring all the people that support us, our students, our programs, our work. We also had a changing of the guard in the Journalism Advisory Council with Michael Shihak, former Arizona Public Media News Director, becoming the new chair of the JAC. We are very thankful for the help and support of JAC members, Cheryl Hillander, Paul Alvin, Joe Altman, Joe Mary Bakley, Jim Calle, Barry Cavazos, Hipólito Correa, Mariana Dale, John, Diana, Scott Harrelson, Kimberly Kaler, Chris Kine, Pia Martinez, Jay McCollum, Nate Olivares, Steve Rosenberg, John Rowley, Nicole Santa Cruz, Lisa Simpson, Mark Woodhams, and David Bonney, as well as of honorary members always supporting us, Frank Sotomayor, Patty Weiss, Bruce Italy, Gerald Sass, and Arlene Scandron. Thank you so much for your help. We couldn't do this without all of you, every advisory council member, every faculty member, every staff member, every campus friend, every alum, every person who values good journalism. I would like to encourage you to empower these bright journalism students. Your wisdom or donation or planned gift will ensure a strong journalism program and a strong press for decades to come. On behalf of the faculty and staff, I thank you for being here. We're going to have a great evening inspired by our special honoree talking about journalism that makes a difference more than ever. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Retis, and let's hear it again for the journalism department and everybody who has made it possible. And now, the presentation of the John Peter and Anna Catherine Zenger Award for Press Freedom. Permit me to introduce Dr. Lori Poloni Staudinger, Dean of the U of A College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. Dr. Poloni Staudinger also came to her position in July from a similar undertaking at Northern Arizona University, NAU. Besides overseeing the largest college at the university, she has an appointment as a professor in the School of Government and Public Policy. Her academic research has focused on women's movements and politics, and in particular, questions around women and political violence. Please welcome Dr. Lori Poloni Staudinger.
Good evening, and thank you for the introduction. And thank you for inviting me to speak at this special event. I want to thank all of you here for being here, for supporting the University of Arizona School of Journalism, its faculty, and its students. As Dean of the college, I am regularly impressed by the work being done in the School of Journalism and by the leadership of Director Redis. The school is moving in new and innovative ways to train the next generation of journalists, and I'm honored that you invited me to take part in tonight's event. It is my distinct privilege to present this year's John Peter and Anna Catherine Zenger Award for Freedom of the Press. As a political scientist who relies on the news media to inform and contextualize my work, it is my impression that the news industry is a tough way to make a living. Never more so than now. From attempts to discredit the reporting to acts of intimidation, harassment, and violence, journalists are constantly protecting themselves, not just from criticism and disinformation, but from physical harm. Despite this, the news people and journalists I know, several of whom are here with us tonight, possess an unceasing commitment to the truth, coupled with a passion and a deep love for what they do. Perhaps this is because they know that their work is an ingrained part of our democracy, so much so that it is the only industry named in the Constitution. As a political scientist, I am acutely aware of the importance of a free press for the functioning of a healthy democracy. Tonight's honoree certainly embodies this commitment and passion to the truth and a free press. Yamiche Alcindor found inspiration in the tragic story of Emmett Till, which led her to not only pursue journalism as a career, but to focus specifically on the coverage of justice, civil rights, and politics. She continues this work in a time when we have seen overt racism grow, shedding light on this ongoing social ill. Yamiche left what she calls her dream job at the New York Times to take a job at the PBS NewsHour covering Donald Trump's White House. She currently serves as host of PBS's Washington Week, and for the record, she has found a new dream job in this role. Drawing on her early inspiration, Yamiche focused her coverage in the days after the 2016 election on how the new administration would impact people of color, even when she knew this may pique the anger of those in the highest office. She stood calmly in front of the former president, even when interrupted, called names, and mocked. Why would she do this? Well, Miss Alcindor is passionate about her work. She remained calm and steady in the face of insult and injury, inspired as she was in her early career to shed light on instances of injustice and racism. She knew that a free and unbiased press is foundational to the underpinnings of our democracy. Particularly in this era of misinformation, when women and people of color are often the targets of vitriolic backlash, Yamiche persevered and delivered reporting that Americans could trust, epitomizing the free press and the people's right to know. This is where Yamiche Alcindor's work intersects with the historical record of colonial-era publishers John Peter and Anna Catherine Zenger. They, too, stood up to abuse and those in power, doing what they thought to be right for society in which they lived. Thus, it is perfectly fitting that tonight, the University of Arizona School of Journalism, along with all of us here, should honor you, Yamiche Alcindor, with the John Peter and Anna Catherine Zenger Award for Press Freedom and the People's Right to Know. Thank you for your work and congratulations on this honor. Will you please come forward? It's my privilege to give you this award.
Thank you so much for this honor. Thank you to the University of Arizona School of Journalism for honoring me with the 2022 Zenger Award for Press Freedom. When I think about John Peter and Anna Catherine and their legacy and what they went through and how they pushed through to tell their journalism, I feel distinctly honored to now be part of their legacy, to be associated with their name, to be associated with this great university. I should say that I've gotten a really very, very warm welcome. Dr. Aritas, as far as she's, of course, running a journalism program and doing all these things, her and her husband also physically picked us up in Phoenix last night. And it really just in some ways was a window into the community that you have here and just how welcoming it is. So I can just imagine how you nurture your students if I, coming here all the way from Washington, D.C., got that warm welcome. So thank you so much for that. Thank you also to Professor McKesson, if he's here, I'm not sure if he is. Yes, I spoke to his Intro to Journalism School, and I got a very good window also into the students that you have, their questions, all the things that they're weighing, their nervousness a little bit, because I know that everyone's trying to get a job, but also their interest in journalism. And for me, I am so excited to meet the next generation of journalists, to know that I might be working for your students, because I've already gotten a very good taste of what your alumni are capable of. My husband's, actually the woman who hired my husband at the Cleveland Plain Dealer, my husband's also a reporter, was an alum of the University of Arizona. So I knew firsthand very early, long before I was ever given this amazing award, just how much your university meant and just how much your university trains people. I'm so honored to be with you in Arizona today, and I'm in awe in some ways of the previous recipients, because some of them are quite literally my old bosses. So I looked on the list of people and I was like, Dean Baquet, oh, I remember him, he hired me. And then there's Katharine Graham, who I interned at the Washington Post when she was obviously owning the paper with her family. I think about the people that I've looked up to when I think of Christian Amanpour and Walter Cronkite, people whose work have inspired me so much. So to be also in connection with their legacies, along with the Zenger legacies, is really, I think, something special. I should also say that I'm very glad to be here with my mom, Dr. Yamiche Alcindor. Stand up, Mom, so people can see you. I'm so happy to be here with my mother, because oftentimes people ask me, how are you so steely? What made you sort of passionate for journalism? And I think of my mother and all of the things that I learned. So there, of course, is this holiday, Take Your Child to Work Day, which I used to go to work with my mom, sometimes on Take Your Child to Work Day, sometimes just because that's what we did that day. And she was a school social worker for 35 years. And for me, journalism and social work are so connected, because what I learned watching my mom go into people's homes, and she has a PhD, and she understood the research, but she also understood people. She understood how to go into people's homes during tough times, traumatizing times, and how to humble yourself and be empathetic with people and ask them to open up and tell you about their hardest parts of their lives. And I soaked that up, even though my mom maybe didn't notice. I was soaking that up. And that's how I do my journalism. When I go into people's homes, I think about my mom going through Miami, going and knocking on people's doors and talking to parents about their children. And that for sure is how I've tried to embody what she's done. My family is also from Haiti, so she is quite literally one of my ancestors, I say, because my mother is someone who left her home country to come to America, to have this dream that is America, what America offers people. And my family, I think, is absolutely living that dream. It's been tough, it's been hard, but watching my mom and her siblings and my grandmothers come to this country and make it their own, and then have people like me to live that next generation. Every time that I walk into the White House, it is not lost on me that it is our wildest dreams that from 1970 coming here in Haiti to 2022, we got to the White House questioning presidents, right? I'm very aware of that. I also tell people, and it's so great that you mentioned Emmett Till, because I absolutely got involved and interested in journalism because of the story of Emmett Till and civil rights journalism. And I never dreamed that I would be covering life and death in the way that I am, but that's what my career has taken me to. And I'm so grateful to my first job, which was at the West Side Gazette, a small African-American newspaper in South Florida. I'd never covered anything. I was a curious teenager, and they took me in and taught me journalism, and it's been one of the greatest foundations of my career. So I always tell people, especially I got a great question from one of Professor McKesson's students, could someone still do what you did? Do you think that there's a path for what you did? And I said, yes, you just have to be willing to start local and be willing to know that you're not gonna start at the New York Times. You're gonna start at wherever someone gives you a job. And it's okay, because I started wherever someone gave me a job, and it was okay. And I covered everything from dead whales washing up on the shores to cats in the tree, literally cats in trees, to missing dogs. I once drove 2 hours because there were a flock of puppies missing on Long Island, right? Like, this is what the beginning of my career was, and it was fine because I love journalism and I had a passion for it, and I knew that if I just kept focusing on my dream that I would be able to realize them. I also think of the fact that I've watched so many people in the last few years do such excellent reporting, which is why I'm so touched that you decided to honor me, because I think of all my other colleagues, from Abby Phillip to April Ryan to so many others that are in the White House, in the trenches, doing the hard work. And it is touching that you decided to honor me, but I will take this award and share it with my other correspondents and my other friends, because I know that definitely in those tough times, in March 2020 in particular, I think back to that month and the whirlwind and the terror and the fear that was really driving my reporting. It was talking to my family members who were scared about whether or not they were going to have ventilators, right? And the questions that I was asking were so simple. It was, do we have enough tests? Are we going to get ventilators? Do we have what it takes to deal with a pandemic in this country? Where are the offices and the people who work here that are supposed to deal with pandemics? I think these are simple questions. They're at the core of press freedom. And I think that in some ways, March 2020 doubled down for me and really solidified to me the importance of journalism, the importance of press freedom. We have to have a free press to have a working democracy. I believe that in my soul. And I think that, thank you. I also want to think about my favorite Martin Luther King quote, and it's a quote that he said, "The ultimate measure of a man," and I was at a woman, "is not where he or she stands in moments of comfort or convenience, but where he or she stands in times of challenge and controversy." And I think we've absolutely been living through times of challenge and controversy. And I would say that in some ways, what this award means to me is that the trouble that I've gotten into, the good trouble that I've gotten into, to think about John Lewis and all that he's told us about civil rights reporting, is that we should all be using our skills and our talents to show up in these times of challenge and controversy. Our country is more polarized than ever. I know in Arizona, you guys know that deeply. You just had a wild midterm election cycle with things just all over the place. And to me, it tells me that we are also a country that is still trying to reckon with some of the hardest parts of ourselves. Mom, remind me to tell you that Dad is calling me in the middle of this, because that's what my dad does. But anyways, we're a country where we are still dealing with the highly polarized nature of our politics. We're also, I think, really still learning about the details of the fact that our democracy almost came to its knees when we think about the January 6th attack, and all that we are still learning, even right now, as we know the Oath Keepers are on trial and so many things are still happening. We think about the fact that there's this racial reckoning that I think is still ongoing. We saw the murder of George Floyd, we saw the murder and killings of so many others, and I think we're still, as a country, trying to reckon with what we want to do with that. We obviously are having an argument as a country about education and slavery and what to teach our students, and I think that to me is also where the center of all of that is politics and the press, and how we allow press freedom to be part of that. It has to be critically part of that conversation. I also think we're still in the midst of a pandemic that is killing hundreds of people every day. And while it's scary, I think it's still our jobs to be covering that and to be doing that and to be shining a light on those areas too. And I also just say, because of course we're in Arizona, we're dealing with so many border issues and so many questions about who gets to be an American and what is an American and who gets to have a piece of this dream. And I think we constantly have to continue to ask hard questions, and we also have to continue to shine a light on ugly truths about what that is and how we answer that question every single day. I'm excited to think that you are training a generation of journalists who are going to be bilingual and who can tackle that story head on in a way that I think needs to be tackled. And last, I'll just say that for me, it is a complete honor to be here, because I still think, and I think deeply in my soul, press must be free. And we've seen attacks on the press in so many ways, whether it's harassment or intimidation, and we have to just know that we have to have the backs of not just national journalists, but local journalists. I was visiting with Arizona Public Media today. I subscribe to a bunch of local newspapers in my hometown, Miami Herald and so many others. Local journalists, as much as I love, you should continue to watch Washington Week and NBC News. You should also just be giving a lot of that love to your local journalism, because they are the people who will tell you about when the hurricane's coming, or where your tax dollars are going, or what your local politicians are doing. I'm sure this crowd is very much in tune with that already, but I always have to hold it up to local journalism because it's where I got my start, and I think it's the place that we are so much seeing a real warning there when it comes to press freedom. So thank you so much for this award. I'm so excited to talk to you a little bit later, but I really, really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you, Yamiche, for your beautiful words, your inspiring recollections, and also for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to join all of us here in Tucson, Arizona. Let's hear it for her one more time, please. And now for tough news. While dessert is being served, okay, we will set up a conversation with Ms. Alcindor, and if you have any questions for her, please write them on the index cards at your tables, and we will be around to collect them in the next few minutes. We will ask as many questions as possible. And permit me once again to thank Arizona Public Media. Let's hear it for where I work, Arizona Public Media, General Manager Jack Gibson, and everybody who makes it possible, and the law firm of Ballard Spahr for their sponsorship of this evening's festivities. Enjoy your dessert. We'll be back in a few minutes and continue tonight's activities. Thank you so much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to continue our event tonight, our presentation, so we can stay on track. Please take your seats. We are going to resume. Thank you so much. Okay, we are now going to begin a conversation with Zenger winner Yamiche Alcindor. This evening's conversation will be led by Fernanda Echavarri. Welcome, Fernanda. Fernanda is a University of Arizona School of Journalism graduate who is a senior producer for Futuro Studios, which includes Latino USA, airing on NPR. She is currently working with NPR on its first ever dual language podcast. She's been a journalist for 14 years with the Tucson Citizen, Arizona Daily Star, Arizona Public Media, where she won a National Edward R. Murrow Award and was nominated for a Peabody Award. For Latino USA, she won a Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award and Mother Jones Magazine. Please welcome Fernanda Echavarri, and welcome back Yamiche Alcindor.
Is it working now? Yeah, I think it's working. Okay.
Hi.
Hello. Congratulations on all your awards.
Thank you so much. Same to
I
you.
just finished listening to Suave.
Oh my God, so
all
good.
in one day. It's the Pulitzer Prize winning podcast by Futuro, and it's just amazing. So yeah, you guys are doing great work. You're doing great work there. You're also doing great work.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I feel so honored to be to facilitate this Q&A with you. I think you're a badass. I'm
Thank
just
you.
gonna say that straight up.
Thank
She is. We've said a lot of things about you, and like we just need to make it really clear that you're a badass. So before we get into some of the questions from the audience, I want to start with getting your reaction to yesterday's news that Donald Trump has officially launched his re-election campaign for president of the United States. So your thoughts on that?
I think it's going to be very interesting to cover. If you guys haven't seen the way that the New York Post reported about it, they literally put it on the front page, but they put Florida man makes an announcement. And then on page 26, they just sort of were like, this man who was twice impeached, he thinks he wants to run again. And to me, it's a really interesting thing because obviously what you've seen is conservative media starting to really try to turn the page away from Donald Trump. I think, though, that the energy that I'm seeing now with people, especially Republicans, being very angry at all the losses that they took, even though they did win the House, they took control of the House today, I'm interested to see sort of what the Republican Party does with former President Donald Trump, candidate Donald Trump, because you also saw that same energy after January 6th. There was a moment where everyone, from Mitch McConnell, everyone said, I can't do this, people were quitting left and right, and then everyone sort of came back into the fold. I think I've been talking to my colleagues about this. I think the one thing that Republicans really can't do is continue to lose in their minds. So it'll be really interesting to see sort of how this all plays out. I'm also think it's going to be interesting just to see, as someone who's a native Floridian, how he and Ron DeSantis work things out, how he and Glenn Youngkin in Virginia work things out, how maybe Greg Abbott in Texas, how they work things out. I think it'll be very interesting to cover, and I think it makes the conversation about whether or not President Biden will run an interesting one, because I don't think he's going to be rushed into making a decision, but I think based on my reporting, it's definitely going to be part of that decision, that now it could either be a rematch or he would have to trust his party to come up with someone that is formidable enough to beat Donald Trump in his mind.
Just hearing you say rematch, I'm like, but
A rematch.
what do you think about the timing of his announcement?
I mean, I think it's obviously very interesting because he wants to kick things off very early. I mean, it reminds me of on Inauguration Day, he said he was running for re-election, right? This is someone who likes running for president, who wanted to he almost announced on the Saturday or Sunday before the midterms, and they sort of his advisors talked him out of that based on the reporting that's been out there. But he said, okay, I'm gonna make this big announcement. It's very interesting to see people in Trump world going on TV to say maybe you should postpone this until after the Georgia runoff. So I think the timing is very interesting, but in some ways, as someone who's now covered Donald Trump for years, it's on brand, right? It's on brand with what we think. He's someone who's gonna do what he thinks is best. He's someone who believes that his political instinct will get him to the place where he needs to be, and he's not been wrong in a lot of those ways. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
So staying on Donald Trump for a minute, what do you think is your biggest takeaway from having been a White House correspondent during the Trump years? I mean, you were a White House correspondent when the President of the United States made an enemy, or painted the press as the enemy of the people. He constantly lied. He was racist, sexist, he was aggressive, and you were right there for all of it. So what's your biggest takeaway?
I think my biggest takeaway is that journalism has to continue to be what journalism has been ever since the Zenglers were doing their thing in the 1700s, right? I think we can't be knocked off course with who we're covering. We have to continue to be the basics of journalism, which is to be simple, to explain things in a simple, clear way. So if someone's lying, I don't make up a word to say untruths or whatever we wanted to call. It's like, if this is a lie, it's a lie. If there's a racist tweet and it's clearly objectively racist or clearly objectively anti-Semitic, we should just say that. I also think that we should remember that we're not for a political party. So we have to be very clear that Democrats have also done things that have been seen as problematic. You just ask, at least for me, when I talk to my immigration sources, they're like, okay, well, look at the Obama administration and what they did. So I think we have to be very clear that we're not kind of getting pulled into putting our finger on one side or the other, because if we look at it in a very clear way, there are problematic things that we can see in both political parties, and there are good things that we can see in both political parties. But I think the takeaway is to try to really be fair and honest, and that means sometimes being down the middle, but that also means this person is objectively lying more than this person, and not being afraid to say that. Like, when I think about the way that I covered the midterms, I didn't say, oh yeah, well, there's some election deniers on the Democratic side. It's like, maybe there are two. There's a whole swath of them on the Republican side. So I think it's being very honest with people. But I think that goes back to when I first learned how to be a journalist. I was taught to explain things at a 6th grade level. I was taught to explain to people what was going on, to try to really meet your audience where they are, and that to me is what we have to continue to do.
If I can, since I have you here, try to get in your head a little bit. When I was watching those daily press conferences with Trump, I was actually just talking about this with a colleague of mine, also a Latina journalist, and we were talking about how we, like from the other side of the computer screen, saw you asking questions and would watch these exchanges, and at the same time that we were going, yes, Yamiche, go tell him, or follow up, we were also so mad for you. What was going on for you in that moment? Because it's really hard to sort of see when you're just watching you. You seem almost unfazed and you continue to do your job. But what is happening in real time for you in those moments?
Yeah, I mean, in real time, I'm thinking this is my job and the American people really need answers. So think back to March 2020, April 2020. They didn't feel, the questions that I were asking felt like life and death questions. It was like, do we have enough tests? Do we have enough ventilators? What happened to the pandemic's office? Like, these are like these simple sort of, can we figure out how to deal with this pandemic? And I think that to me is what was going through my mind. There were hundreds of people, my mother, other people, who were watching the news and frankly terrified to see if we were all gonna actually survive this. So for me, it was very easy to focus on that because I think there are so many people who aren't gonna be at this White House briefing, but who really wanna know, do we have enough vaccines? Do we have a plan in place? I mean, the biggest question really was, do we have a plan, right? Like that was like the underlying question to every question was like, are we gonna get through this, yes or no? Like there's a scientist back there who knows what's going on, right? Like, yes, no, like you can't, drinking Clorox can't be what the real answer is to this, right? So I think that for me, when I think about being unfazed, I think the purest form is journalism for journalism's sake. I wasn't thinking, oh, he's being kind of rude to me, or like I remember at one point of those interactions, he was like, you used to work at the New York Times and now you work at PBS. And I remember like, it took me until like 2 days later where someone had to be like, I think he was trying to tell people you were fired. And I was like, really? Because in reality, it wasn't even processing in my brain that he knew who I was, because I was like, he never said my name. So I always thought, well, maybe he doesn't even know who I am. Like and then it was like, oh, actually he knows exactly who I am. Like he actually knows my resume. He's clearly been on my LinkedIn. Like clearly knows who I am. And that to me was kind of like striking because it's the president of the United States. Like he has so many things to worry about. And yet somehow here he is like knowing my resume. So I think that was kind of a little bit of surreal, but in the real time, I really was thinking, I mean, I have so many friends. I think of one of my best friends is a makeup artist with a son who's autistic. And I would talk to her and she was just beside herself. She was home with this kid with special needs, had no money coming in, her apartment was falling apart, and eviction notices were going out. And to me, it felt in my soul, this is the time when journalists need to step up and do our part, because you were watching those, we were all watching as doctors were like, getting bruises on their faces trying to save people, and nurses were in Central Park running morgues. I mean, to me it was like one of those times where it's like the country is showing up and everyone's doing their part. The bus drivers are still driving and the grocery store people are still at work. So journalists, we need to step up and take the personality and the drama, and yeah, it's nice to be on TV but it's like, this isn't what this is about right now. Right now, in this moment, it's about getting answers for the American people and trying to give people information they can use. Last thing and I mean, that's why I always talk about local journalism whenever I'm at this, because I think local journalism is such news you can use. My mom might not remember this, but my first internship with the Miami Herald, I was clipping my stories, I was like showing off my stories to my mom. I came home one day and there was a story that was like on the refrigerator or in the kitchen clipped, and it was about how to prepare your pool for hurricanes. And I was like, oh my God, you clipped my story yourself? And she's like, you wrote that? And I was like, wait, what? And it's because like the news was so news you could use, she didn't really care that her kid wrote it. She needed to like take that to the pool place and like physically like listen to like here's what the newspaper said I should do. That to me is what COVID felt like, right? Like COVID felt like here's what you do. You put on your mask, you're gonna wash your hands. Like I felt like I was giving out information that was like, here's how you survive your daily life right now. Don't go outside. We were all Clorox wiping everything down, right? Like it was like that to me is how I felt in that moment. I felt like a first responder, especially because I was going into a White House where people were getting sick, right? Where I was going to super spreader events where people were ending up in the hospital. So even going into the White House, I had to have conversations with my husband, like, I'm going into the White House, this is gonna affect both of our health. I might come back with this virus. And those were like real moments where it was like, but who's gonna do this work? And I felt like, I have to go and do this work. I remember my mom would call me like, are you going in for real? Like, what? Those people are sick, what's going on? And I'm like, yeah, Mom, I'm going to the White House. And at the moment, going into the White House was dangerous, frankly. And it was scary, but of course I was wrapped up like a astronaut, right? Like I mean, you couldn't even see who I was half the time because I was like in a Ziploc bag. But the point is that I went in because I felt this calling to really do it. And I think in many days, sometimes it doesn't feel like journalism is life or death, but in those moments, it was so life or death.
You're like putting me back in those moments and how so many of us felt and relied on people like you to ask those questions. So, thank you. Yeah. We talked a little bit about the harassment that you received at the hands of the President of the United States, but we also know that he has a very large following online, and people are incredibly, I would say they feel more emboldened to be aggressive and violent and threatening when they sit behind a computer screen. What, during your time and during the Trump press conferences and that tension, were you receiving messages? Were people harassing you online? Did you experience that or not? And how did you sort of deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think every single White House reporter between 2020 and 2022 dealt with harassment in some shape or form. So I was definitely getting it, but so many other people were getting it. It was tweets and emails and craziness. And I mean, the way I do it is, I'm Catholic, so I pray. I have my mom who's constantly like, you're covered in the blood of Jesus, you're not going anywhere. And I'm like, okay, so if these people try to come get me, hopefully my mom's prayers will also stop them. So there's that. But because that's all, what else can you do, right? Like, think about Nancy Pelosi's husband, right? I mean, there's so many sort of scary things. Your university, unfortunately, has dealt with scary things. It's just in the last few weeks with that unfortunate murder, killing. And we're living in a scary time. But I think that, even in my times where I'm rattled, I'm like, well, at the end of the day, this is my passion. This is what I was created to do. And because I'm so connected to the 1960s civil rights journalists, I think about all of the dangers that they had to deal with. If you're writing about voting rights in the 1960s, you're going to Mississippi and you might not come back. And to me, I think that I'm in that legacy of people saying, well, you're not going to intimidate me. Like, I'm not going to be scared to do my job. I'm not going to not ask questions or tell tough stories because it might trigger somebody. This is not what I'm going to do. And it's a scary decision to make, but it's also a decision I make knowing that I'm fully walking in my purpose.
I have one more question of mine, and then I'm going to get through the stack of questions from the audience. I guess my question is shifting gears a little bit, but we talk about the importance of freedom of the press, and I think that it's very important also to talk about diversity of the press. And beyond race and ethnicity, I think gender, socioeconomic status, religion, there's so much that is missing. I can speak from experience at places where I've been before. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you think the current state of diversity in media is. And I think, you talked about how the racial reckoning is still going. You said that in your speech. And I think that a lot of newsrooms a lot of leaders in newsrooms in the summer of 2020 were like, oh, we got to do something. And then it kind of, went away. So can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing as far as diversity in newsrooms and what's ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think the situation's a lot better now than it was even 10 years ago. In terms of the diversity in the media, I think it can always get better, because you need diversity not just in front of the camera, but behind the camera. You need it at the leadership level. You need to be able to retain your diverse talent. You need to be able to give people raises so that they can actually want to stay in these jobs. So it's a very hard thing, because the media is also going through a financial reckoning, and all the business models are changing constantly. So I think it's a tough thing, but I think overall, the goal always has to be more diversity in every single way. And I think that's, of course, race and gender, but that's also experience in terms of, do you have people that live in rural America? So I have my in-laws are from a rural part of Virginia. And we talk about broadband. I had a nephew who literally didn't have the sort of Wi-Fi that he needed to go to school every day. So I was acutely aware of what the broadband needs were in rural areas just because of who I married. I think that if you don't have newsrooms that also have people that understand that, you hear, oh, there are broadband issues, and you don't really understand what that means for education system that is built to have people learning remotely. What it means if a student has to go to McDonald's for 8 hours a day because that's where the Wi-Fi worked, right? So I think that we're definitely doing better. I think I was lucky that the places that I've worked have been pretty diverse and have been getting more diverse. I think of the New York Times as super diverse. At least in my experience, like there were a lot of people of color. PBS has always been diverse. I think of Gwen Ifill and Charlene Hunter Gall and these people who came long before me. I think of NBC, a lot of my bosses are people of color. So Rashida Jones is a black woman, first black woman to be the president of a network at MSNBC. The head of the DC bureau in NBC is also an African-American man. We have Janelle Rodriguez, who's heading up our streaming on NBC. So I think, and like Cesar Conde, who is literally the boss's boss, he's the chairman of NBC Universal. He's someone of Latin descent. So to me, it's very, very exciting to work at a place that really, I think, is seeing diversity and really believes in diversity, and the leadership is there. Like this is probably the first job that I've really had bosses that are diverse through and through, up and down, and that's also very exciting to see. But I just think we can always be better, because I think for so long, and I almost think maybe the death of George Floyd helped newsrooms see this. For so long, I think that the approach was you were doing people of color or diverse people a favor by hiring them, and it's like, you're not doing me a favor, I'm doing you a favor. like I'm coming to work for you. So I think that, and I will say this new generation of journalists, this new generation of, they sort of have a little bit of that, what are you giving me that I'm coming to, it's like, yes, like when I was desperate for a job, I was applying everywhere, I took the first job, and some of these young students are like, well, what's your benefits package? And I'm like, yes, what is the benefits package? Ask the question, because I didn't. I was like, oh, what, is there health insurance? I didn't know. I just was so eager to get a job that I didn't even think about it. So I love Generation Z and all these young people that are coming in and a little bit more clear-eyed than I was coming in. So I think that that's incredibly important, because we can't think of diversity as doing people a favor. Diverse newsrooms are how we tell stories accurately. Even the midterms, we had this conversation nationally. Is it abortion? Is it inflation? That was a big conversation that was going back and forth. I went to 10 states, Arizona, Missouri, Michigan, Ohio. A lot of the stump speeches that I was hearing, apart from inflation and abortion, which were top issues, there were cultural issues there about transgender rights. Almost every single Republican that I was listening to their stump speeches, they were all in on transgender rights, questioning transgender sports and how that works. The school boards in this country arguing over banning books. These are completely critical things that we're arguing about as a country that sort of are flying maybe a little bit under the radar if you don't have diverse reporters, I think, to say, hey, this is a really big story. And I think the racial reckoning, it's still happening, because I think diverse reporters are like, yeah, we're not gonna not cover this. And I also think that there are my colleagues who aren't sort of people that would be traditionally considered diverse, my white colleagues, they're also talking about this stuff. And I love that. Because yes, you'll have black reporters who love covering race. I love covering race. I am happy to cover race. I don't think I'm being pigeonholed. There are people who are very worried about not Latinos who don't want to cover the border issues because they don't want to deal with that. I'm not that, but you also should have agency, right? So if you hire a black person, maybe they just want to cover Wall Street. And if you hire a white person, maybe they should be the Black Lives Matter reporter. Maybe let them go cover some stuff, right? I think that diversity has to also be, don't just hire someone and think, okay, well, since you're Gen Z, you're gonna cover TikTok. And since you're a 50-year-old, you can go cover retirement, right? No, we can flip things on their heads and let people cover a little bit of what they actually are interested in.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to get to some of your questions. And I will start with this one. I'm a high school student. I enjoy journalism very much. However, I am shy and would like to know how you incorporate your methods, per se, into everyday conversation. Also, I've made editor-in-chief position at my school. Congrats. Do you have any advice for me personally?
Well, you can't be that shy if you're editor-in-chief, right? Like, you can be kind of shy, but you can't really be that shy. You're probably shy in your head, but you're obviously fierce enough to have already gotten that position. So I think it's just, even if you turn your brain off and think like, I'm just here at work, I don't think I'm someone who, left to my own devices, would just be sort of wanting to meet people and wanting to, I think there's someone, I don't think that left to my own devices, I'm someone who sort of just mingles out of nowhere. But leave me in a room where I want to write a story about abortion, and I'm going to talk to everyone in the room if I have to. So I think a lot of it is that sort of Beyonce, Sasha Fierce, like, okay, I'm going to turn this on for this moment, can't be shy. Journalism, you can't be shy. There are some jobs you can be shy. This job is not one of them. Like, whether you're radio, print, TV, you have to talk to people. It's like literally a requirement. So I would just practice talking to people. I say my questions out loud when I'm interviewing people. I really try to like get myself comfortable with what the subject matter is, but just go out there and figure it out. And then, you're in high school. It's great that you're already starting in journalism. I started journalism in high school. I think it's never too early to find your life's passion, and good luck, and maybe one day I'll be working for you, so also think of me.
This is a maybe fun one. When you get to get another sit-down interview with Trump, what's your opening question?
That's a great question. I would definitely have to think about it. But if I'm thinking just off the fly, which is not the way that I would ever approach an interview with Donald Trump, I would have read 18 different things. But I probably think the question I would be is, will you accept the results of the 2024 election if you lose? Because it's how we got to January 6th. So I think I'd probably be, are you kind of ready to accept the results, whatever they may be?
What lessons has the press learned in covering lies and disinformation from U.S. politicians?
I think it's that we have to slow down a bit sometimes. I think the inclination, especially when something as big is happening, is to take it live. If you're doing an interview, I remember those early Donald Trump interviews where he would call into a cable station and he would talk for hours, and it was newsworthy. I remember I was covering Bernie Sanders in 2016, and covering the presidential campaign means sometimes you have 20-hour days. Right? So you get back and you're bleary-eyed and you're stumbling into some hotel that smells weird and you're sleeping in your coat, trying not to get bed bugs. And I would turn on the TV and Donald Trump would be on and I'd be like, oh my God, I can't go to sleep, because it was what is this? I've never seen this. What is going on? That to me is how, I don't even know what the word is, but it was electric / what, we've never seen anything like this before. So I think it was definitely newsworthy, but I think we also learned lessons of, you can't just let somebody who is clearly someone who has a real hard relationship with the truth and often lies, you can't just let sort of someone blather on on your airwaves. You have to be ready to fact check in real time. It might mean that you take that speech and then listen to it afterwards and be ready to put it in context. I think about his announcement speech. Some people took it live. MSNBC did not take it live. CNN and Fox News did. None of the networks broke into their regular coverage. And I think it's because, it's not that it was not a newsworthy event, but it's everyone sort of needed time to take this in and say, well, what's he gonna say? And how do we fact check that? And how do we make sure that we're being good stewards of the resources that we have? And I think that that's a big lesson that we had to learn.
Despite your passion and drive for journalism, during your early years when you wrote miscellaneous stories, like Chasing Puppies, did you have any doubts or discouragements?
It's a great question. I always wanted to be a journalist, so the most minute stories, I still would say I was gung-ho to cover them. It doesn't mean that I wanted to wake up every morning, and that some mornings when I was chasing dead whales, I remember literally having to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning because a whale had washed up on shore and I had to go cover it. And I was this is the bane of my existence. How is this what I'm doing with my college degree? But then the other part of me was well, this is kind of fun that my job is to run around looking for whales. Like, it's like, so even in like what I would say is like the kind of not great storytelling parts of my career, it was still invigorating because I was doing something that I really loved. So I never doubted that I wanted to be a journalist. And I remember I made the decision when I graduated not to go to law school, and it was a decision that I think was big in some ways because they send you the law school packets and they show you the starting salaries once you get out of college, and I'm like, oh my God, I would make so much money if I just went to law school. But even then, in my heart, I was lucky that I was, especially as a young person, I was able to still tap into like, what do you want to do? And what I wanted to do was be a journalist. And I remember my dad, who was always calling me saying, you're crazy, you need to go to law school. My mother was actually, I think, a little worried, but like still supportive. And that's all I sort of needed. And I was able to sort of say, okay, as long as my parents don't have to pay my rent, then I can go do this. And I think that I was able to do that. Did I borrow money sometimes? Clearly. But like, did I definitely need help furnishing my apartment? Of course. But at the end of the day, I think that when you find your life's passion, and I really feel lucky that I found mine, that I think that it was like at no point was I like, oh, I'm gonna go be a Wall Street banker, because I was living in New York for my first job, and one of my best friends was a Wall Street banker. She had money to buy tables at the club. So I was like at her fancy apartment in downtown Brooklyn while I was living in a closet. I didn't care. I still didn't want her job. Like I was like her. She was like, I could probably get you a job at my job, and I was like, I don't want your job. Like I don't want to be sitting in front of spreadsheets. Like no, I don't want to do that. So you know, to me that to me was a sign that even in the worst parts of it, it was still exactly what I wanted to do.
There are a few questions, so I'm just going to sort of put them together about what challenges you have faced in your career as a Black woman.
So I'll say the decision to get on TV and to not sort of decide and decide that I was gonna look exactly the way I was gonna look was a big one. Because I definitely, there was definitely internal and external pressure to straighten my hair, put on a wig, lose weight, which losing weight is fine, but like it wasn't exactly what I was gonna do to get a job. So there were these things that I was definitely nervous about. And I think for me, I really credit my village, which was my mother, and also my friends, other Black women, who said, no, you're beautiful, you should just go do what you wanna do. And I have a friend who was in the Miami market and said, you know, she had a news director tell her, if you're not pretty enough to stop the channel, then I'm not gonna hire you. And her news director wanted nothing to do with me. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not gonna work in Miami, I guess. Like, I love my hometown, I always wanted to go back to Miami, but like, it wasn't a market that was gonna say, like, sorry, you don't look like a cheerleader, so we don't have anything to do with you here. And I had to be like, okay, well, that's not where I'm gonna end up. I'm gonna end up at a substantive place where I tell great stories, and PBS was my first TV job. Not once did someone say, hey, your hair's a little off, or like, we don't like, it was like, they were like, you come as you are. We like exactly the way you look, there's nothing to change about you. And that, to me, was one of it was very, very important to me in stepping into the role of TV, because sometimes people step into TV and they lose themselves, and I never wanted to do that. And that's I think a challenge for sure, because for anyone who's worked in TV, it can be really tough, because the moment you put yourself in TV, especially women, the criticism is rough. It can be just you don't look good, or you're ugly, or you're fat, like all sorts of crazy critiques that you get, and you have to sort of have the backbone to say, okay, but I'm gonna tell my story. Now that doesn't mean that my mom hasn't told me like, oh, your eyebrows were like a little off today, or like, I've had my best friend be like, never wear that sweater again. Never, ever wear that sweater again, right? Like, but at least you have people that love you who can tell you that, right? So if they're coming in from a place of love, you need some criticism, and it's fine. My husband has definitely said, like, this dress is retired. You've worn it enough, it's enough. So, you know, but I think once you have a village that can give you real feedback, and I give my husband feedback, and I give my friends feedback, as long as it's coming from a place of love, because there's gonna be so much sort of just peanut gallery, and I mean, and the last thing I'll say is, you know, social media to me can be really a dangerous place. I understand people giving me love on social media, but I don't let it affect me too much, because that same love can turn into hate. You like the question I'm answering or like you like the question I'm asking today, so you're really into me. Tomorrow you might not like my question. Before I was sort of having these interactions with Donald Trump, I had a pretty testy relationship with Bernie Sanders, where we had interactions that were very tense. And some of the Bernie bros, they really didn't like me. And I was like, well, and so when this was happening with Donald Trump, I was like, oh, well, if you guys think that I'm mean to Republicans, like, go ask Bernie. Like, I am absolutely an equal opportunity. Like, I will ask you a tough question. And then when Biden came up, I was asking him tough questions. So I think that it can be tough because people are like, oh, well, why are you being so tough on Biden? You know, he's so much better than Trump. That's not my job. My job is to ask tough questions and to try to get at sort of the places that we don't know a lot of stuff about. So I think that I am just someone, especially for young people, I tell them, it's great to be on social media, but I'm not someone who's like, oh, 12 people liked my picture. Now I'm validated. Like, I can't. Like, it's just like not what I do, and I can't, like, that can't be real world. Like, it's just not the real world for me.
When you give weight to a positive comment or a negative comment, you can't give weight only to the positives because they'll also feel real when they're not.
Yeah.
There were a few people who asked about how you take care of yourself. What is your self-care routine? How do you sort of process everything that you have going on every day?
Yeah, I definitely take days off. I go on vacation. One of the best advice I got was if you want to go home, go home. One of my best friend's mom told me that, so if I want to go to Miami, if I'm like having a bad week, I just go to Miami. I'm just like, you know, I'm gonna go home. Like, I'll see y'all when I see you. If I feel like I'm having a bad day and I don't want to go to work, if I have to show up because it's some big rally or something, then I'm not gonna take the day off. But I take personal days if I just feel like I want to go lay down. I've taken days off where all I do is sleep. Where I'm just like the day after the midterms, I was exhausted, and the minute I got home, all I did was sleep all weekend, and it was glorious. So I think that's definitely something. My husband and I sometimes meditate together, which has really gotten cool because my husband is now into yoga, which is very interesting for me, because he's 6'5", so it's just like the most hilarious thing when like a man that big is doing like downward dog. You're like, what is going on right now? But it's great. So I think that like together we've found sort of healthy ways to do that. And also I took up hiking. I love hiking as a city kid, which is I never would have thought, here am I climbing hills and mountains but the DMV, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area just has so much beautiful, lush forests, and I just love that. I love going for a 2-hour hike, and not fast. I'm not someone who's like, I'm not a runner, but I'm someone who like will take a long, long walk. So I'll be gone for 4 hours sometimes and just walking and thinking through my week, and I love that.
So you have to come back to Tucson, and like not on a day that it's packed, but you have to come hiking here and go on hikes and all over Arizona. This feels like a big question to end on. Do you have optimism for America's future?
Yeah, that's a deep question.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all living here still. So I think that, I mean, it is the bar. It is a little low, but it's the bar. I think that one of the things, especially because I watch a lot of international news, because my mom watches the French news and Haitian news, I think that America is still exceptional. I think that the reason why my family moved here, those reasons can still exist. And I think that the American people really, I think, not all, maybe, I think at least, especially for the people, and America is such an immigrant country, I think for so many people that our families are not originally from here, and you can trace the people who decided, oh, I heard about this place called America, so we're gonna go over, that if you're Italian or German or whatever, like this country is so much made of those people that I think at our core America could still be exceptional. I think it's just, we have to continue to strive to be better. And I think when I look at the next generation of journalists, and the next generation of Americans, frankly, that I feel optimistic because I think that they're amazing people. I think of these young journalists who are asking hard questions. I think of these young political activists who are really in tune with what's going on. I think of racial justice activists who are asking America, pushing America to really continue to ask what's going on in this country. I met this transgender activist who really she's like 14 years old, who really educated me about a lot of the things that are going on in the transgender community. All of that makes me optimistic because I think that there are people in this country that are really pushing for us to understand our similarities more than our differences. And SNL is probably one of the places that I think of a lot because I think comedy often sort of says the things that we don't say out loud. Like there was that skit Double Jeopardy where they had a Trump supporter and an African American, and they were standing next to each other, and they're like, well, I want better education, and they're like, yeah, I do too, and I want my better wages, and I do too, and I want America to work for me, and they were like, I do too. I think in our core, a lot of Americans are still wanting the country to do some basic things. Why the country isn't doing that is obviously the sort of your political leanings. Who you blame for that goes back to your political leanings, but I think at our core, we still can hear each other in some really deep ways.
I know we're done, but there was a question for your mom. May I? She's on the phone. She's looking at the phone like she's not hearing me. So we
horrified at public speaking. I learned this at my wedding, by the way.
Well, I'll just read the question. You don't have to answer. But question for your mom: When did you notice your daughter was on the path God set for her, and what did you do to nurture and encourage it? When she was born. Short and sweet.
You want to answer more, Mom, or is that all?
Yeah, more.
Come here, you have to come to the mic. Oh, they can give the mic to you. Again, she hates public speaking, so this is kind of horrifying to her, but
It wasn't my question, it was somebody else.
When she was born, I was a teacher. I took
Put the mic to your mouth.
two months of maternity leave. By the time I came back to work, she didn't get up there in the night anymore. She was so independent. At 2.5 years old, as an older brother was 8.5. He used to go to school every day. She wanted to go to school. And my mother was home with them, and I had a housekeeper also. But she wanted to go to school every day. Can I go to school? Can I go to school? So at 2.5, I took her to daycare. I was there. When I was going to leave, I'm crying. Bye, miss. Bye, Mom. And I said, what is this? And a brother cried for 5 years. So I knew she was going to be something.
Thank you for answering. So that's it. That's it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. Sorry that we couldn't get through all of them, but thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you once again, Yamiche Alcindor and Fernanda Chavarri, for that interesting conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, that is our program for this evening. Thank you for being here and supporting freedom of the press and the education of young journalists. Remember that your donations to the School of Journalism will make a difference. And one more round of applause, please, for our 2022 Zenger Award winner. I just want to tell you that whenever I watch you on any Friday night, it is so wonderful to know a lot of background information about you and your mom. Both of you are wonderful, exceptional people, and we really welcome you here in Tucson, Arizona. Thank you very much for your time. Everybody have a great evening. Thank you very much.